So in this video, I'm going to help you kind of see through the eyes of Russian propaganda, Russian state media, what they're trying to say and why. So we're going to look at this article, Pravda.ru. Where did the US strategists go wrong when they started a proxy war with Russia? When they started a proxy war with Russia, what are we talking about? Started it? Like, no, the West started it. We didn't. We were forced into it. We didn't want to have this war. We tried not to have this war. Okay, the West is confused. The gas station country, that goes back to John McCain's famous statement, that was defeated in the Cold War, ruled by an authoritarian regime with its economy in tatters. And that's the way that many Westerners have viewed what's going on in Russia, is now winning a proxy war against the West. It's not now winning, um, but let's keep going. And this guy's charming, isn't he, with a Z here? Okay. Russia's resilience comes as a surprise to the West. Well, the surprise is that they would write Russia's resilience because they haven't been, so they have been able to sustain, but they haven't been like resilient, like springing back to something. Okay. Politico has recently categorized, and she's going to go, the author is going to go through a number of categories here of how Russia is just so resilient. Politico has recently categorized the Russian central bank chairwoman Elvira Nabilnya as one of the disruptors of the year. Overcoming sanctions and mitigating their efforts comes as an unconditional achievement of the entire financial and economic bloc. It is the whole government, including the prime minister, who did not let the economy crumble. There's something going on. There's something funny about the Russian economy. With the amount of sanctions and the amount of the reduction in trade and the way that things have shaped out. Now, I've never been the guy saying that sanctions work by themselves. Like, I even did an entire video, sanctions don't work. But at the same time, they're manipulating something within the Russian economy that's causing it to stay afloat. It's not that she's just a great, financial mind. Something is lying or not seen or something. I would almost bet on that. Okay, Western observers do not understand why the armed forces of Ukraine failed to conduct a successful counteroffensive. No, that's not true at all. The Western observers understand fully why the armed forces of Ukraine failed a counteroffensive because they didn't have the stuff. They were delayed before they had the weapons to approach it, and they don't have combined arms, and they don't have air superiority and so they're running into these landmines. We get it perfectly. Okay, the West has given Ukrainian military men everything they needed. Full stop. No, they haven't. They've given them a lot, but they have not given them everything that they needed. But the Russian forces, after the disastrous summer of 2022, managed to gather up and launch a sustainable offensive along the entire front line. Okay, so they do have an entire front line, so that part is true. But as far as a sustainable offensive along the entire front line, are I don't know that we're thinking in reality here because okay, so let's look at this. Here's Kyiv Post, Russia's worst month, right? Think about Avdiivka. November troop losses comparable to World War I. Okay, Russian soldiers' casualty counts during the month of November 2023, which just ended yesterday, appear to be nearing World War I rates. On average, 994 men killed every day during the previous week, and said more than 25,000 Russian service personnel died or were severely wounded in combat during the month of November. So I'm not sure what they're saying here when they're claiming that it's doing great, sustainable offensive along the entire front line. Yeah, I get the line hasn't broken, but your offensive is not what you're claiming. And now, what Russian propaganda usually does is they say like, and well, if we lost X, Ukraine lost 10X or 8X or something along those lines. So if you take 25,000 that the Russians lost here and you multiply it by 8, well, first they won't admit the 25,000. But you multiply by 8 because whenever they say it's like 10 times or 8 times. That means that Ukraine lost 200,000 men. That certainly would be unsustainable if it was grounded in any reality. Okay, so yeah, the West does not know how to analyze Russia's institutional stability. There's a little bit of truth to that. Like we do get it a little bit off, and we don't quite understand the way they think about some things. Miscalculations of American strategists about Russia. Where did Western strategists do wrong? Where did Western strategists do wrong? Go wrong, I think is what they mean, when they started a war with Russia in Ukraine. Well, first, they didn't start a war with Russia in Ukraine. Second, do wrong is bad grammar, so find a competent translator. They never understood the Russian mentality that consists of, now there's some truth to this. We don't understand the incredible endurance of the Russian people. If you say to endure misery, well, maybe that's not right, to endure unnecessary misery. Like they do have an incredible endurance to endure unnecessary misery. Like that is part of how the Russians roll, and I'll give them that credit. Inability of Russian people to live under Germans, but this was not like you started it. This whole thing didn't have to happen. Okay, they failed to predict what Russian President Putin would be capable of. That's true, but not in the way that they mean it. That's true because we assumed, no, he's not going to do it. And if he does do it, that's going to be bad. But hopefully he won't do it because he's going to be saber rattling. And okay, so that's the way we thought that we could write it off to he's on the border saber rattling so he gets some kind of concession and then he's going to take his army from Belarus and go home. That's what we thought. Joke's on us, right? Like we got it wrong. So we did fail to predict what Russian President Putin would be capable of in that sense. That's not what they meant. They meant in order to stay and struggle and fight and be the kind of great leader that would lead us to victory. Okay, Emmanuel Macron came to Moscow to dissuade Putin from making sudden movements, but this wouldn't be a sudden movement. He's been preparing this since like 2003, 2005, something like that. Macron admitted a year ago that the European security system would be impossible if the West did not take account of Russia's interests. Okay, that's an interesting line because the West should have taken account Russia's interests. But I do have a question to that. Does Ukraine get a vote? Because if we don't get to take account of Ukraine's interest as well, and Ukraine's interest is we don't want to be in a position where Russia can roll over us, we want to join NATO, then, okay, I get this line. Macron admitted a year ago that a European security system would be impossible if the West didn't take account of Russia's interests, but Ukraine should get a vote too. Okay, Western strategists hoped that Russians would rise, or that Putin would be dismissed in a coup. Okay, the coup did not happen. I think that is an accurate reflection in the sense that we should have understood more than we did. We didn't understand that the Russian people aren't like people in Western Europe or the United States that wouldn't put up with certain things. They put up with, unfortunately, a lot of stuff. But what's interesting is I saw this in the ISW on Twitter today. This is the Institute for the Study of War. A recent opinion poll indicates that the number of Russians who fully support the war in Ukraine has almost halved since February of 2023, and that more Russians support withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine than do not. That's a new event, and that's going to be tricky for Putin as we move forward, as Putin is about to go into an election cycle. This is probably the worst news that he could get. Okay, so yeah, so the Russians would be dismissed in a coup, but the coup did not happen. Russia managed to overcome sanctions and develop the defense industry while keeping all other sectors of the economy well afloat. Again, there's some kind of funny money there. I'm a management professor that teaches leadership. That's my specialty, so I have enough credits to teach econ, but I don't see, I'm not sure exactly what it is that is going on, but there's some kind of funny money going on there. Okay, Russia's GDP is expected to grow by 3.5% this year. Again, I'd love to talk to economists about this and try to understand what's going on, but something seems off. Okay, they underestimate the power of the Russian army. There are a number of miscalculations here, from the spirit of the Russian soldier to the ability of Russian military leaders to quickly learn and adapt. Okay, let's take that last one first. Russian military leaders, they may learn and adapt, that's fair, but they don't do it quickly. They keep doing things slowly. And the spirit of the Russian soldier, so I'm not so sure about that. Here are some things like, if you listen to Russian media, they'll talk about, their morale is great and they're, ready to fight. Like, they might have had a hard time last year, but this year they have everything. Okay, here is insights from Ukraine and Russia. I signed a contract that said 3 months of training, 6 days, blank. It lasted 6 days. A contract that was supposed to give him 3 months of training lasted for 6 days. How do you think he's going to be? How effective do you think he's going to be? 2 of which were spent on the road. 4 days. Okay. Probably the command believes that if you fight in the old-fashioned way, it will work. I don't understand that. They're not exactly motivated like you would think, based on the kinds of articles that we're reading here. That they're motivated. They're ready to fight. Okay. There are a number of miscalculations from the spirit of the Russian soldier, their motivation, and to the ability of Russian leaders to learn quickly and adapt. And like what I just showed you, I just pulled up randomly the most recent one from Insights from Russia and Ukraine. I wasn't like hunting for one to show you to, undo this particular paragraph. So The Economist magazine asked, is Putin winning? Like that was the article title. Now I have not read the article, but it would depend on what criterion you use to answer that. But Ian Bremer answered the question. Putin has expanded NATO, pushed Europeans to dramatically increase defense spending, faced 11 rounds of unanimous sanctions from Europe, gotten Ukraine invited into the EU, created the most powerful Ukrainian military in Europe, and you ask if Putin's winning. So how about that? And then he goes a little bit below that. Putin's botched job. You got it right the first time. Isn't it amazing how Putin painted himself into this kind of corner with exactly that shape? Okay, so they end with this. Who will be responsible for the sufferings of millions of people in Russia and Ukraine? Will the United States get away with it yet again? What? The United States, like, on February 21st, before the invasion that followed, like, none of this had to happen. You invaded your neighbor. We didn't start anything. We weren't egging you on. Anyway, okay, so tell me what you think about this, because this is par for the course of what you see with Russian media. They blame their opponents. They blame, like, what they're doing, they blame on others, and they project, and you saw it for yourself. What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.